All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm Peter. I'm from Schoolscape. I'm going to be hosting this morning's session, but welcome to another Schoolscape online webinar. The purpose of these webinars is to really help you as schools by kind of bringing on experts, introducing you to companies that can really help you. So on stage today with me is Brett, who is a legal expert from Bentley's. So Brett, thank you for being here with us. And we've also got Luan, and he comes from RealPay, and he's got a lot of experience when it comes to debit orders. And we were just chatting pre this, and Brett let me know that this morning, Cape Town School, an article in Daily Maverick, the school is battling to get school fees in to such an extent that they've had to reduce salaries. I think, Brett, you said by 20 to 50%. So I think if there has ever been a relevant time for this topic, it is now. And that's why we've got these two panelists on that we believe are really going to be able to give you insight into help and understanding what your school can do at the moment, how to effectively collect school fees, and legally what the standpoint is. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. On your right, ladies and gentlemen, of your screen is a chat bar. You are welcome. There we go. Nazmin has just said hi, so thank you for that. So if anyone else wants to say hi, you can. What I'm also going to do is, there all the highs are coming in. What I'm also going to do is I am going to drop in a link to a survey. So Brett, it's going to go in and I'll push it again. Brett from Bentley's is running a survey just to understand the effect on school fees. So if you fill that in, post the webinar, we'll be able to email you those results. But that's enough from me. Brett, I'm going to start with you, if that's all right. I think as a legal expert, I think there's a lot of schools that have a lot of questions. And please, schools, if anyone has questions, in the questions tab, you are welcome to drop a question, and we'll see if we can get to them. Brett, so thank you. I think if I can start straight with the question, the DBE, what have they said about school fees during COVID?
Fortunately, the statement that was made by the National Minister of Education on the 30th of April has said that school fees are due and payable. Obviously, that is specifically relating to public schools, but it's a similar situation with the private schools out there. So it's positive that the Department of Education is behind the schools in terms of payments. The advice that they gave is if that any parent has any issues, that they are to go and discuss it with the schools. So yeah, that's a positive place for us to start in terms of the financial support for schools.
Okay, well, that's great. Okay, so Brett, when it comes to, I think a lot of schools are looking for clarity, just understanding their legal opinion. So I know what's been in the media a lot is parents talking about using the legal principle of force majeure to argue that schools have not performed, and because of that, they don't need to pay school fees. Could you address that and just give some clarity to the schools just around that?
Okay. Yeah, it's a wonderful French word. It just sort of rolls off your tongue, doesn't it? First majeure.
Yeah, I'm sounding fancy here.
And I think it's caught on quite a bit because of its snappiness. But to be quite honest, in South Africa, we don't have a concept of force majeure. We've got a wonderful little legalese called supervening impossibility of performance. So hence why everybody's calling it force majeure. And the reality is, just to explain a force majeure, if you look at back in 2014 with the Ebola virus that happened in West Africa, there was a situation where the governments in West Africa said, we're stopping people from going to work. Situation was that certain mining companies there couldn't work. They were then, in turn, their creditors were looking to them for payment. And they turned around and said, force majeure, we can't pay. Because some supervening impossibility, something came in that stopped them from actually being able to perform. And I think we can safely say that both, whether it's the virus itself or whether it's the lockdown, the effect of this is a force majeure event. Now, the effect is, what effect does it have on schools? And to decide that, you've got to sort of divide between the private schools on the one hand and the public schools on the other hand. With the private schools, it comes down to a contractual relationship. So yes, public schools can say, for example, if a parent of a learner had to come along and say, well, you couldn't perform for me this year, I haven't had education, I want to sue you for damages for a loss of a year. Let's just say if the year was lost. In that situation, the school could raise a force majeure and say, well, we couldn't perform. But from the same perspective, if the school says it can't perform, there's also the responsibility to pay. So it's a two-way contract. The one is the offering of legal services, the other is the payment of fees. So for private schools, the big thing is their standard terms and conditions. How does it deal with force majeure? But that said, the important thing is as well is that at this stage, assuming that schools are not shut down to such an extent that performance is impossible, private schools can argue that they are substantially performing. And because they're substantially performing, they are entitled to get their payment. Okay, so that, Peter, is private schools.
Yes.
Moving across then to public schools, there's a phrase that a lot of public schools have heard me say in my seminars and my talks, and it's a drum that I beat regularly, is public schools are not a contractual liability, it's a statutory obligation.
Sure.
Okay, so because it's a statutory obligation, if you look at the way that the SA Schools Act is saying, there's no nexus between the payment of school fees and performance. It just says that if you are registered as you have your child admitted to a school and they're at that school, they have to pay. So yeah, that statutory obligation is what is going to help public schools, other than the fact that the majority of public schools have also, the same as private schools, substantially performed. In addition, even if, if we want to really get technical, there's even a chance that if a parent of a learner at a public school wanted to claim the repayment of fees, let's just say worst case scenario, our worst nightmare, the Minister of Education later this week comes along and says schools are closed for the rest of the year, that's it, we'll look at things again in 2021. In that situation, if a parent is already paid, the claim might not be against the school. It might actually be against the Department of Education. Because if we look at the provisions of Section 60 sub 1 of the SA Schools Act, it says that the Department of Education is liable in the place of schools for any acts or omissions on behalf of the school.
Wow. So government schools are very protected in this regard.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So look, obviously the big thing is, and I suppose we're all waiting with bated breath to see what the Minister of Education says, but it's whether the main thing is, can we get substantial performance of schooling in this year?
Okay. Brett, just on that, a question came in from Megan, which I think is pertinent. She asks, would online learning have been enough to fulfill the school's legal obligation? So if a school is providing online learning,
yes,
does that help?
Okay. Look, it could well. It depends on the extent of the online learning. You know, I've heard of some schools having, 2 lessons a day, 40 minutes each. Would that be substantial performance or not? There can be a question mark over that. So even if it is online learning, it's got to be measured against that substantial performance.
Okay. Brett, thank you for bringing clarity on that. What are the trends at the moment? You mentioned a school in the Cape at the moment that is having to drop their salaries. As a company that deals daily with schools, what are the trends that you're seeing now in collection due to COVID?
Okay, well, look, it's been published as well, I think a couple of weeks back. Curo, the JSE listed educational company, they've publicized a 20% reduction in collections. And I think they're probably at the better end in terms of collections rates. You're probably looking at schools, depending on their economic demographics and a number of other factors, anywhere between 20 to over 40% of non-payments. So it is quite substantial at this stage. Yeah.
Okay, that is incredibly high. Brett, I think we've obviously got a lot of schools that are viewing in at the moment, and they are dealing daily with these parents that are paying or not paying.
Yes.
Can you advise them, from a legal point, any tips, tricks, ideas just on how to deal with parents during this period? Anything that would help a bursar or a school?
Okay, look, the main thing is I think you've got to ring fence what, for want of a better expression, the COVID debtors. So in other words, the parents that are directly affected by the financial turn, I mean, we're talking about 3 million South Africans losing their jobs in the last couple of months. Those type of people have to be ring-fenced and be dealt with slightly differently. Why do we have to ring-fence them differently? Because they're not your traditional debtor. And I'd just like to just compare a study that was done in America. So there was a study done in a debt collection company post the financial crisis in 2007, 2008. And what that study showed was that traditional debtors took 2.5 years to pay off the debts of this company. But if they looked at the people that had been retrenched as a result of the financial crisis, those people paid off their debts within 9 months. So I think you can't treat these people as you would your traditional debtors. You have to have a certain degree of ring fencing, finding out that for a fact that they are adversely affected, that they're not just selling you one, yes, and telling you that they've been affected when they haven't. But if they have really been affected by it, the leniency should be there to deal with them in a slightly softer approach, as opposed to going out full, issuing summonses, taking legal action. So allow them a time to rehabilitate, because the chances are these people are people with a good work ethic, and just purely circumstances have affected them. For the rest, your traditional debtors, I almost say, do something different with them. Them, you should be handing over quicker than the COVID-affected debtors. So those are the debtors that you should be getting out the system. In terms of securing, particularly the private schools, I'd recommend, if you can get these COVID parents, any parents, get AODs if you're changing the payment terms. Public schools, it's not that important because it is a statutory obligation, but I would be saying doing that, getting AODs on private schools, dealing with day-to-day with the COVID debtors and assessing their situation and the validity of it, and then taking slightly more robust approach with your traditional debtors, and particularly debtors that you might be carrying from previous years. Those should definitely be handed over as soon as possible. And the other thing is obviously, and that's why Luan is here, is to look at your internal systems. Look at how you're doing. Take a more proactive approach in terms of your credit control. If you have to get more staff in, if you have to outsource, be more proactive in your debt recovery, because there's an old cliche in the debt collection world: the squeaky wheel gets the oil. If you're the one that's making the noise, you're going to get the payment. And in terms of debit orders, I'll leave Luan to explain the details of that. But just before I lead into hand over to you to speak to Luan, I just want to say that as a company, we've used 2 different banks in terms of debit orders. And one would think that banks were the experts when it came to debit orders. The level of service that we received from the banks was shocking compared to the level of service that we've received from a specialist like Luan. So that's just my little punt as a client of Luan's before we hand over to him.
That's great. I think, Luan, I'm going to get to you. Thank you for sitting patiently. Also, to everyone sending questions, thank you. I think we're going to give Luan a talk to chat for a bit, and then we're going to grab some questions afterwards. I know we want to try keep the webinars to 30 minutes. I think what we might do is make 10 minutes also available past 30 minutes just to answer some of these questions.
Okay, sure.
Brett, just before I ask Luan, because I think this might be a good leading question, as an expert, in your opinion, with schools, how effective are debit orders? I know we're going to be talking to Luan now, who handles that. Just your kind of professional opinion on the most effective way to get fees from parents.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, in the old days, before certain constitutional court cases changed things, one of the most effective tools was using what we call garnish orders, emoluments, attachment orders on people's salaries. That's no longer there. So the debit order has got an incredibly important role to play in terms of collections. And my experience with schools is that they don't use it as efficiently as they could be using it in terms of their collections.
Okay, brilliant. Luan, thank you. You've been incredibly patient. Brett, I see there are lots of questions, so we'll get back to you back at the end. Luan, so by way of introduction, Luan is from RealPay, so they are experts when it comes to debit orders. I think easiest question to ask to start with, Luan, is, in your opinion, why should schools get parents onto debit order systems? Why should they do that?
First and foremost, thanks, Peter. I think, Brett, thanks for that wonderful testimonial. We do have quite a lot of clients using our system, collecting bad debt on behalf of schools, and I let you reciprocate and really commend you guys on what you are doing at Bentley. The professionality is an utmost high standard, and we can see it in your results. So yeah, well done. Peter, I think at this stage where we are now, balancing empathy with a payer relationship and commitment is going to be more important than ever before. We want to employ a collection strategy that differs from the norm. The norm, as Brett said, was in the past we issued a garnish order. That's a lengthy court process. It's quite expensive. It's quite a shameful thing to have against your name. And I mean, I issued a lot of garnish orders when I worked at the attorneys about 12 years ago. But then I got into digital payments, and I want to expand this conversation not only to debit orders, but to digital payment options, which debit orders is just one of those. I think at this stage, keeping up with trends, keeping up with world trends, collecting your money should adapt quite quickly. I think the main benefit that I've seen in employing a debit order strategy in educational sectors is the fact that it keeps the relationship between the school and the payer healthy. Either in the past, as Brett well mentioned, we phoned them, we asked them, where are you going to pay? We send them letters, we send them emails, we send them SMSs, we send them WhatsApps, we send them doves with little post-its on them. So we really try to enforce people to pay. It's called a push payment. You push the person to the ATM saying, please go and pay your tuition fees. On a debit order approach, it's more of a pull payment where you can actually negotiate, as Brett said, with a segmented COVID crowd or COVID payer crowd. You can actually negotiate payment terms with them, saying, listen, I know you've been negatively affected by this pandemic, which a lot of us were. But can you then at least agree, instead of paying 1,000 Rand per month, let's agree to 500 Rand per month, if you can afford it, or what can you afford, and then we settle at an amount. Earlier we mentioned that there are now schools that's laying off people, paying people less, reduction in salaries. Enforcing a decent collection strategy at this point in time is going to be pivotal and crucial to everybody attending this seminar's livelihood. As long as we can collect funds, we can pay salaries, and we can keep our households alive. So enforcing debit orders at this stage is crucial. It is now more than ever important to really look your collection strategies.
So, Luan, what I'm picking up from you, if a parent is coming and saying they can't pay school fees, it's nearly to negotiate with them and say, that's fine, we can reduce it, but then we want a debit order. One of the questions that just came through, which I think is quite relevant with this conversation, can a school force a parent to use a debit order, or is it an optional?
You can never force somebody to use a debit order because it has to be consensual from both parties. But it speaks back to the contractual agreement that Brett mentioned earlier. The parent has a contractual obligation to pay the school. So you can obviously throw that as a bit more stern way of getting to sign a debit order. But what I've encountered with a lot of debt collectors in South Africa is that debit orders is just one of the payment options. So I mean, you're more than welcome to give them options. I think it's just key to have flexibility in your payment terms so that it sits well with both the school from a financial management perspective, as well as from a parent from an expense management perspective. To have that in between and to settle on a payment by debit order is actually key. I just need to add that paying by debit order is the cheapest form of payment for both school as well as payer.
Oh,
From the payer side, cash is expensive, and even on the school side, cash handling fees are quite expensive. So enforcing a debit order by far is the financial clever way to go.
Okay. Luan, talk me through if schools are presently using debit orders or are looking to use debit orders, what kind of paperwork, etc., do you need in place? I think obviously the more effective it is, the less likely it is for people to default or you can get the money. So what do they need in place?
Yeah, Peter, it's quite important to note that we are a highly regulated industry. We are overlooked by the Payment System Stakeholder Forum, which is our association, reports right through to the Payment Association of South Africa, which in turn reports to the South African Reserve Bank. And debit order abuse is rife at this stage, and I'm sure each and every one of us present here today has read about it in every form of newspaper or business online. People are going around collecting money without consent, and some of you present here today might have been affected. So it's crucial to have a mandate, as we call, or authority to debit, in place with the payer, with the account holder, with the person we are collecting the funds from. I think that's the long and the short answer. We do constant audits where we ask for 5 random authorities to debit. We see if they actually speaks to the reporting that we get on amount, on date. So yes, Peter, there are some documentation, which in essence is also a contractual agreement between the two parties.
Okay, brilliant. And then we're getting quite a few questions on people defaulting on their debit orders. How do you handle that? Can you run the debit order again if it bounces? What are the steps? I think we've had 2 or 3 people just mention that they've seen a lot. They've seen increased defaults. How do you handle defaults on debit orders?
Yes, Peter, I think the first thing that people cancel when times are tough is life policies, gym memberships, and debit orders. It's been increasingly easier to actually stop or dispute debit orders, and I've done both. I mean, I had to test the end-to-end system. The reason why people dispute might be seasonal, i.e., January months or in a pandemic like this. Reducing the fee and renegotiating the terms, I found, is the most effective to actually get success on those debit orders. You might have a debit order in place. Let's say, let's take an example. Let's say I'm in a financial crisis. I've got 10 debit orders in place, ranging from 5,000 rand to 500 rand. The ones I'm going to cut first would be the higher amount ones, because that's going to give me most bang for buck. It's a simple call to my banker, and they actually do a bit of a mandate with yourself, indemnifying themselves, and then the debit order is cancelled. In some instances, the people who dispute the debit order if it's a no-day transaction, and those funds are available back in their accounts immediately. What we have picked up, and I'm seeing I'm taking too much time now, but what we have picked up is an increase in debit order disputes or stop payments over January months, due to the reason that people get paid early in December. And then obviously there's holidays and there's and then January they haven't got any funds to actually available for payment. So then you'll have an increase. But it is seasonal. We process millions of transactions per month, and we have some decent strategies, which is part of the value proposition of RealPay, to actually minimize our debit. I must just conclude before just confess. Of all the transactions RealPay runs in their system, less than 1% are disputed. That's purely a result of decent contracting and advice from our side.
Okay, so Luan, on that, and I think it's a relevant question, if a school is looking to set up a debit order or is not happy with their present debit order company, what is your advice around that? Kind of, why should they use a professional business, or should they do it themselves? If you could just speak into that.
Yes, I think as Brett also mentioned earlier, we do debit orders. In South Africa, we're a multinational company. We provide right through from account verification right up until debit orders. And we've partnered with both FNB and ABSA from a supporting bank perspective, meaning we can collect from all the bank accounts. It's just you have a choice of where your money settles into. We've got a specific type of debit order called a NIDO debit order, a non-authenticated early debit order, which is now being merged to debit check, which is a whole other conversation. The nice thing is there's no surety payable by the school, and you will have your money the next day. It's not pooled and pay over. So let's say on the 25th, which is a popular salary date, if you use a NIDO debit order, which collects early in the morning, and then you collect R1 million on the 25th, that whole million will settle into your account the next day. We don't keep any sureties, we don't retain any funds. And then you get a normal debit order, which is old technology, where funds are retained for a minimum of 5 days. It depends on the product that you use.
Okay, awesome. Brett, we're going to get back to you in a second. I think, Luan, last question. If schools are looking to set up a debit order, if they're looking to appoint a company, can they contact you? Can they speak to you? How do they do? And do you have any kind of special offers or anything that schools need to be aware of?
Right, so guys, usually we have some admin and time that goes on setting up a school to collect via NIDO. And usually we charge a activation fee of 5,000 Rand. We have extended a special for everybody that is present in this webinar to waive that 5,000 Rand completely. And then we work on a month-to-month contract. So if you can get in touch, either info@realpay.co.za. Afterwards, Peter, I trust you guys will send out communication with contact numbers. My own personal contact number will be on there, as well as my colleagues, Quintus Swart, who works very personally and closely with Brett. And we're more than welcome to show you what it looks like, book a presentation, which is free. Once you see the system, once you see the ease of use, people tend to sign up close to 100% of the times. We have similar systems in the market out there that you may know of, something like ABSA Integrator. We have humanized ABSA Integrator and make it quite user friendly, which is key.
Cool, awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, we always try to keep these webinars to 30 minutes out of respect for you. So we understand if any of you need to duck off, but I see there's about 100 questions I think Brett and Luan can most probably talk into. So what I would like to propose is I'm going to get on to questions now, but just before I do that, for anyone who needs to duck off, thank you. We've appreciated having you on. Luan, thank you for that input. We're going to get some more questions coming your way. Brett, we've got lots of questions, I think, coming your way. Maybe just before I get into questions, just in case anyone needs to duck off, Brett, how can you help schools? In a nutshell, if a school needs help, what is it that you can help with?
We can help them with the collection of those outstanding debts. So there's a certain point where internal collections don't work, and we are one of the highest performing debt collection agencies in South Africa. We specialize in school collections. We know what it's about, so we can assist them in getting that money in.
Okay, brilliant. Also, Brett, you are incredibly highly rated on School Advisor, our partner company. So, okay, I don't know where Luan has disappeared. I think his internet might have dropped, but if he comes back on, he can help answer questions. For those that can stick around, I'm going to just choose a couple of the questions. I know we have quite a few here. So I'm going to dive into, let's see, question. Okay. So Andre asks, if at a school budget meeting, it is agreed that school fees will include a service fee as, for example, sport, outings, camps, etc., and now we are unable to offer those extras, are parents entitled for a reduction in school fees?
Okay. Look, firstly, again, we have to distinguish between the private schools and the public schools. The private schools, it's purely a contractual issue, and it's I know a lot of public schools a lot of private schools that we act for have actually given refunds and discounts on services like that where they are not able to perform completely. Public schools, really, it should be, again, a question that we're seeing is that a lot of them are also giving rebates in terms of those extra services which they're not able to provide.
Okay, brilliant. I think, Luan, this question is going to be for you. Tamsin asks, what are the fees involved of a school if we outsource the debit orders?
I'm going to need some clarification on outsourcing the debit orders. Okay, all right. I think she basically just asking what's going to cost.
Yes,
them.
what's it going to cost?
Yeah, Tamsin, we have a monthly fee. That's your minimum financial obligation to real pay. The setup fee usually is $5,000, which I now said is waived for a special for this. And then you pay per transaction. So you pay a fee for a successful collection, which is much less than any bank handling fees, I can promise you that. And there's also functionality built into the system where you can actually track a person's bank account for up to 32 days. And if any credit or the required credit moves in, then you can deduct the money immediately, which also comes at a fee. But I think when we do the comprehensive online presentation, we will go through the fees in detail. But for your budget purposes, you are looking at less than 2% expenditure versus income.
Brilliant. Luan, thank you. Also, just so everyone knows, as soon as the webinar is finished, you will get an auto email with Brett's contact details and Luan's details if you need to get hold of them. Brett, a question for you. Maureen asks, are we allowed to ask for financials from parents? I know some of the other comments in the chat were around asking for pay slips. What can a school ask for legally?
This is a bone of contention, even when it isn't a pandemic and a lockdown, as to how far schools can actually ask and what details. But yes, if the parent comes to the school and is asking for any form of payment rebate or payment terms or exemption, yes, most certainly the school is entitled to ask for income and expenditure and a pay slip to back that up. The extent of how far schools are entitled to go, that's another debate for another day. But yes, financials, asking a parent what the income expenditure and a pay slip, absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you. We just a quick, anyone who is watching, and we had one person saying she was a bit distracted, couldn't fully concentrate. You can watch this on demand at any time. So you can literally go back on the link and watch at any time. All right, Brett, another question, I think it's in line with all these extra fees. Shanae asks, what about aftercare fees? Should it be discounted or cancelled in total if a child has not been able to go since March?
Look, it depends again how aftercare has been run. A lot of schools run aftercare as a separate entity to their school, whether they are private or public, in which case, the question is, how far have they performed? If they have performed for aftercare, yes, absolutely. They're entitled to the payment up to the period that they've paid. But if they're not giving substantial performance, then no, they can't get those fees and recover those fees.
Cool. Thank you.
Because it's not part of the usual schooling.
Yes. Luan, if you could comment on the following. Avril says, many of our parents do not have banking accounts. We do have SnapScan, but our parents still believe in cash payments. Phoning parents are a nightmare. No answering of phones, incorrect numbers, the list goes on. So you spoke about you have multiple digital kind of tools to help get parents to pay. Is there any tips or advice you could give the school?
Yes, Peter, I think obviously if we need to collect via debit order, we will need a bank account, which is the prerequisite. If in the absence of a bank account, we are now in development and basically rolling out card collections where the person can actually give their debit or credit card's number and we can do a recurring payment against that card. There are multiple other streams actually to use, which we are looking at. We are looking actually with a growing demand of e-wallet and mobile money we can collect from those accounts. But I think I saw something in the comments earlier on Easy Pay or Pay At, which is also a very effective collection tool that's outside of RealPay. It's totally out other companies. It depends on the demographic, and it depends on the payer. It depends on geographical challenges, locations. But I think that's the discussion we can have when we do the live presentation. That is a whole hour and a half discussion on its own. But yes, I think in South Africa, we do face challenges on bank account integrity and bank account existence. And that's something out of our scope.
Okay. Luan, just then a further question for you. Bridget asks, collecting debit orders during lockdown has been a bad experience as parents dispute and the debit orders are returned. How do we fix this? What does a school do in that situation?
Yes, I have also seen an increase in disputes, Peter, and I mean that was it's just obvious that people are going to dispute and reverse debit orders. Let's just have a look at stop payments versus disputes. A stop payment is just stopping the actual month-to-month debit order, and a dispute is actually where they go in and say, I don't recognize this debit order, which in my view isn't 100% ethical from parents, especially if you've been paying for 11 months and come number 12 and you all of a sudden raise that I don't know who this ultimate creditor are. Guys, managing your debit orders in this day and age is going to be tough. It boils down to KYC. It boils down to bank account integrity. We provide a service. It's called ABSR, real-time account verification, where you can actually only on parent ID number confirm that the bank account number they've given you is open. It exists. It's open longer than 3 months, and it accepts debits or it accepts credits, which also a service that we offer. And it guys, all our debit order loading, checking for reports is all done online. We don't install anything on any servers. So back to the question, you can actually manage your disputes from wherever you have internet and laptop and internet connection. So guys, disputes will go up in this time, but it will also go down. It boils down to KYC and making the proper arrangements with your parents, knowing that if they can't afford 1,000, make an additional arrangement for 500. You don't need to do a payment arrangement again. You don't need to do a proper mandate again because the amount is going to be less than the agreed amount. Cool. Communicating with the parents constantly, that's important.
Just to ask a question, as RealPay, would you assist the school with that planning and how to do that? So what could a school expect when it comes to help in that regard?
Our business model is is built on the premise that we make the most amount of profit on a successful transaction, and that's the God's honest truth. So if you are sitting with a successful collection rate of 70%, I'm not going to be too happy about it, because we're making 70% of our potential income. So you will be assigned an account manager, which in this case will be Quintus Swart, and which will engage with you on a monthly basis and say, listen, let's look at these dates for the next month. Let's try and submit your debit orders for those dates. Use a bit more tracking, lesser your amounts. So all of the account managers who will look after your account are paid commission on your successful transactions. So they'll make quite sure that you are as successful as possible and running high 80% successful collection rates like Brett himself does.
Brilliant. Thank you. No, it's great also just to know that the role of, I think any school can do with as much support as possible. Brett, I've got a legal question I'm going to read to you, and I have to admit, I've just read it now and I fully don't understand it, so I'm hoping you will. So here we go. It's Ryan asks, under the common law principle of supervening impossibility of performance.
Supervening impossibility of performance, yeah.
Yes, and the SA doctrine of impossibility criteria, these events must be unavoidable and make proper performance of the contract impossible, and must not merely make performance more burdensome or economically onerous. Ryan then asks, how is proper performance defined? I'm just going to repost this question in the chat bar because I battled to read it. So
okay,
it's
Ryan.
Yeah, if you want to take it.
So very legalese. Yeah, just basically bottom line is proper performance is always the subject of a dispute, and in this case it will be. And that goes back to what I said. I used the term substantial performance. Ron uses the word proper performance, but it's whether or not the school can perform its educational obligations in the way that it's meant to. So, you know, have they educated, have they completed this academic year, is, in my opinion, what would be a proper performance.
Okay, brilliant. Well done for answering that one. Brett, another question Dion has posted, and it says, a majority of our parents are foreigners or asylum seekers.
Yes.
Could you advise if handing them over for collection is worth the effort? Okay.
That depends on if you are handing just over to an attorney who's going to charge you fees for the work done, then my answer as a general rule of thumb would be no, because a lot of these people can be very difficult to enforce a legal process against. But if you are handing over to a debt collector such as ourselves, which are charging on a commission basis, then it is you're not losing anything by handing them over because it's not costing you. We will then obviously make a call as to whether or not it's viable to go legal based on the particulars of the particular matter and advise you accordingly. I see a follow-up one there. Can you list a parent on RC there? Yeah, I would. A non-COVID parent I would feel quite comfortable with doing, and as long as you're complying with the listing requirements, in other words, you have the parent's consent, you've sent out the letter in terms of the National Credit Act, and they are in breach of their terms of payment, then yes, you can list them.
Okay. I think we're literally going to go down to the last one or two questions. I know we've gone over time and I want to respect how busy the schools are. Brett, one of the questions that came in a little bit earlier asked, if a parent can't pay school fees, as a school, can you direct that parent to a no fee paying school?
No, absolutely not. In terms of established case law and the Act, there's no way that you can refer somebody away once they've been admitted to your school. So the basic principle is once the child is in your school, as a public school, you cannot refuse them on the basis of their inability to pay.
Okay, All right. Brett, Corin asks, are there any attorneys or debt collectors that will do the Section 41 letter on behalf of the school? There we go. Okay.
We do it on behalf of our clients and make sure that they comply with that. It's part of our service to clients.
Cool. All right. Okay. So Tia asks, where do we stand when we have given an online service to all learners during lockdown and a parent then claims they did not use this or could not access it? So why should he pay for school fees? He did receive all other information sent via the same way. We're a public school.
Okay. Yes. I think that it's the year has got to be looked at holistically. So you can't determine, the parent can't say now that they haven't received the full year's education, because it's a combination of the online and the future teaching that child is going to receive. So if it's a public school, I think that most certainly that parent is on thin ice and doesn't have a valid argument for the non-payment of school fees.
Cool, brilliant. Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be the last question, and then I'm just going to close. Milani asks, we have a grade R parent. Can we deregister them for non-payment?
Okay, again, assuming that this is a public school, can you just confirm that? If it is a public school, it would depend on how they've set it up. Because public schools, grade R's are getting introduced more and more to be a normal part of the education stream. So I would be reluctant to exclude them at this stage for non-payment. But look at the specifics. I'd have to look closer at the specifics of that case.
Okay, brilliant. I think, ladies and gentlemen, if you are looking for help, I think this is a crazy time. We will send you an email now with Brett's details, so from Bentley's. What I really liked is they go on a commission basis, so it's in their interest to get everything in, and they are top rated on their reviews on School Advisor. We can highly recommend them. They have a great response from school, so they are a trusted party to help. If you are then looking for debit orders, just online payments, that kind of stuff, please reach out to Luan. They have very kindly agreed that if your school is looking to implement a debit order, or if you want to move over to them, they are going to waive the setup fee. And I think, Luan, that fee is normally around 5,000 Rand. So
yeah, that's about 5,000 Rand, Peter. There's a small regulatory fee of, I think, 420 Rand per annum that needs to be paid, which is not real pay fees.
Okay.
And then, as I said, it's on a month-to-month basis. Peter, I forgot to mention one thing, which I think is quite topical of this conversation. We have recently invested in a sister company of ours called Talent Plantation. And I think it's going to revolutionize education. It's quite exciting to actually go and see. So you're going to have a look at Talent Plantation. It incorporates 3D and 2D technology in online education. It's amazing. It's revolutionary. So please go and have a look at that.
Please pop the link into the chat bar so anyone can check out. And then from Schoolscape side, Brett, thank you. Luan, thank you to all of the schools. Our apologies for going long, but I thought this was worth it. I think this is a relevant topic. Just to let schools know also, our next big event we are holding is Schoolscape IT. So if you are involved with IT purchasing, an IT manager or IT budget, we are running an event. It is a free event for schools, and it is going to happen on the 18th, 19th, and 20th of August. And what we are doing is we're going to be showcasing what schools are using when it comes to technology. So we're getting real school managers to share their experiences. We'll also keep you up to date of any other upcoming webinars. Brett, once again, Luan, thank you. I think you've given a lot of people a lot of clarity, so we really, really appreciate your time. To all of the schools, thank you once again. I'm going to repaste just the link for our upcoming event. I'm also going to paste the link for Brett's survey. So if you would like to fill that in, that would be appreciated. And that is us. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. We appreciate all of your time. Brett, Luan, thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye bye. Have a good day.
All right.